And one of the things I wanted to start off with was the mayor last week gave his State of the City address. Now, painted a rather rosy picture of the city's fiscal situation, but we had the opportunity to talk after. And you said, look, we're in a position where some really hard choices have to be made. And, the mayor will put forth his budget shortly, but have we made any hard choices, and what hard choices need to be made that will move Providence forward?
Well, I think we have. We've made some difficult decisions, but decisions that needed to be made. The majority of our challenges lie in our post-employment benefits. Mm-hmm. So our pension, our health care costs. We took a step to move our suggested rate of return down,
yes,
which means we have to make a larger contribution every year. But that's an important step. It is in keeping with the commitments that we've made. We need to look at every contract, every agreement with a thought and an idea that what that impact of those will be going forward. And then we really need to begin to address the issue of how do we, particularly the pension, how do we begin to fund that pension at a level that it needs to be. There's some options on the table. They're difficult options. They're unpopular options. It's going to take everyone who has an interest in mm-hmm. these benefits and these commitments pulling in the same direction. That's the city, that's the state, that's retirees, that's current folks who are currently contributing to that pension plan who hope to get a benefit somewhere down the line when they retire. So we need to convene those folks, and those are some difficult conversations we're going to have, but not conversations we should shy away from. The problem and the conundrum that we find ourselves in, we didn't get in overnight, and we're not going to get out overnight.
That is true. Talk to me. What did you think about the recent firefighter contract? Again, looking at 5 years, and again, not addressing any pension issues. Talk to me about those two facets of it. Do you think a 5-year contract was appropriate? Does that set a precedent moving forward?
Well, I think it was a very good 3-year contract. It wasn't the best 5-year deal. But when folks talk about pension reform with the firefighters, we have to take the long view and remember that when the previous administration under Mayor Tavares understood and spoke of and tried to rally support against this Category 5 fiscal hurricane, mm-hmm. the first folks that stepped up out of all our labor organizations were the firefighters, mm-hmm. and they were side by side with the city trying to figure out how to address some of these things so that we could at least slow the slide. So they stepped up. They were there. Having said that, this contract does have some built-in savings that are substantial. Being able to move from 94 firefighters per shift to 88 is a significant savings, or at least will be when we get a full complement of firefighters. Having retirees pay a co-share of their health costs, long-term, very important, significant savings. So I think overall it is a good deal. It's not the best deal that we could have gotten. It's not the worst deal we could have gotten. But isn't that the fair deal when both sides think they should have gotten more?
Yes. So let's talk a little bit. There have been folks in the community, as you know, talking about the prospect or potential for bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. Talk to me why is or isn't, should bankruptcy be on the table as an option?
Well, I think bankruptcy suggests that we surrender, that we put up our hands and say there's nothing we can do. And I think that is absolutely the wrong posture to take. There are things that we can do. Bankruptcy is neither inevitable, nor is it absolute. Mm-hmm. There are many things that we can do to avoid that trajectory, to change the trajectory of the city, and some of the things that I spoke about, really beginning to fund the pension plan at the rate that it should be, finding some way to inject a one-time infusion of capital there in exchange for some reforms. Some of these things are unsustainable. A compounded COLA is unsustainable. Mm-hmm. We need to protect the asset for those folks, and sometimes we've got to look at it like we're protecting them from themselves. Mm-hmm. So those sorts of things that we can do, that we should do, that we must do, change the trajectory. And I think if we take it seriously, which I believe everyone does, that changes the conversation, and we're no longer talking about bankruptcy. I think it is the last option. And by the way, bankruptcy doesn't change the problems that got us here. Mm-hmm. When 46.3% of the city's tax base pays zero and growing, it's only a matter of time before you hit that tipping point where it's unsustainable. Bankruptcy does nothing to address that. We really need to be much more focused on the big picture and address some of the things that are causing Providence's economy to be incompetitive with what else is going on in major metro areas.
So do we need to go back to the table with the nonprofits? Do we need to look at what their contribution is?
I think we need to alter the relationship that we have with the nonprofits. It is the sector of our economy that grows most often, and it continues to grow. And to their credit, they compete very well with those that they choose to compete with. But as I often say, what we want to reach a point that when Brown or Lifespan announces that they are acquiring another building, that the rest of the state cheers and we cringe. We want to be able to celebrate with their success, celebrate the things that they do well, celebrate their ability to compete in those fields that they've chosen to compete with, and not feel that we are being that we're losing because of it, that we're subsidizing that success with our tax dollars.
So talking about subsidizing and talking about winners and losers, you've been very outspoken on the issue of education and achievement first. You've spoken out about being able to fully fund the regular public schools. What do you have to say to those parents that say, I'd like an achievement first option, that's where I'd like to send my child, but the city is sort of putting the brakes on it? What do you have to say to those parents who say, this is the option that I would like for our family?
And I think, look, I fully believe my kids went through the public school system, graduated from the public school system in support of the public schools. But I think that parents should have a multitude of choices. Where my concern lies is if we keep sifting away resources from the public schools, what's left? What's left for those kids who are not the most supported kids who have to go to those public schools? So I think that there is a balance. The dynamic has changed. When we first started having conversations about charter schools were talked about as laboratories for learning that then would inform and be imported into the public schools. That's no longer the case. Now, charter schools are in direct funding competition with public schools. And we need to ensure that if we continue to believe that public school needs to be an important option, needs to be something that is a promise for all kids, that they can receive a quality public education, then we need to make decisions that support that. And putting them in direct competition, and some would argue, and I'd agree, unfair competition with charter schools, it's a recipe for disaster. We don't have enough dollars now to redo our schools, to really give the kids the type of education. And if we start to count fewer and fewer dollars, then it's public education, and those kids die a very slow, painful death, and that's not what we want for any of our kids.
How do we address that situation? As you mentioned, and as we know, I mean, the work that the school needs, just from an infrastructure standpoint, hundreds of millions of dollars, which the city can't do. So with that finite budget that we have, and we can't address all those issues, how do we best use the resources at the city's disposal when folks are, putting pictures up of buckets at Dr. Martin Luther King School collecting water? Is it triaging the most needy? How do we make sure that the schools are being funded, that the money is being spent to the best ability that it has?
So we much like our housing stock, our buildings are of a certain vintage, and we've deferred maintenance for far too long. These buildings now need significant infusions of maintenance, and those cost dollars. It used to be that we could count on the state through the funding formula to be able to provide those rehab dollars. We used to be able to do that in a predictable way. When the state moratorium was passed, not allow those uses anymore. Now we're kind of, it's duct tape and bubble gum. It's not really the best approach. So I think that understanding that the condition of our schools, not only in Providence, but in urban communities around the state and suburban communities around the state, we really need to pay attention to the climate that we create for education. And we need to be able not only to rehab these buildings, but to be smart about how we lower the costs and are able to continue to maintain those properties.
So, we're located here downtown. Obviously, there have been a lot of issues focused here in the city, both Kennedy Plaza, from issues of panhandling to how do we help homeless individuals with substance abuse issues. How do you think the city is doing? How would you rate the job the city is doing in addressing the needs of the most vulnerable that are here, and what do we need to do?
Well, I think, first off, the responsibility for addressing homelessness and panhandling and all those issues that come along with that, substance abuse and mental health issues, is not solely the city's responsibility. It is a statewide responsibility. When the state decided to tear down Harrington Hall or Welcome Arnold Shelter and not replace those shelter beds. You know, those folks overnight didn't move to Fall River. They found other places to sleep. When we closed down sections of the Eleanor Slater Hospital and had made fewer beds available for those folks who have substance abuse and mental health issues, those people didn't disappear. They came here. So I think the responsibility for addressing the most vulnerable populations is a shared responsibility. It becomes part of the state's issue, becomes part of the city's issue. I think that we struggle with how to do this. It's not what we do. We are lucky and fortunate that we have great partners in social service agencies around the city who have stepped up to help us begin to address the effects of this. And what we're really struggling with, right, is not it's not the root cause. It's more like the manifestations. And if we can try to address the manifestations, but what we're doing is moving those folks from one part of the city to the other.
Yes.
So we need the state to partner with us to make a commitment to addressing homelessness and all the issues around homelessness, and address some of the more things that some of the more powerful issues that keep people homeless, like mental health and substance abuse.
And speaking of addressing, I did want to ask you while you're here on the show. You've had some campaign finance report issues, and I know that you said you're working to address those. Can you explain to folks where things are at with that and where you plan to be?
We've been for probably 19, 20 months in conversations and negotiations with the Board of Elections. Most recently, the Board of Elections decided to send our case to the Attorney General's office. We have not heard.
Okay.
I feel that we've been completely transparent and disclosed all that we do. And I'm hoping that this issue gets settled in a manner that puts it to rest and resolves it and doesn't detract from the work that we're trying to get done.
And speaking of the work that you're doing, you're here on February 8th. That's Black History Month. Yes. You have an event next week that you want to tell folks about. Oh,
it is. For the second year in a row, we're providing a historic look back at the history of African Americans in the city of Providence. And this year we've looked at the road, it's titled The Road to Black Suffrage, and how history conspired to ensure that black folks could vote and participate fully in the democracy here. I think it's some amazing history. We'll have an event next week where we invite everyone to please come. There'll be lots of surprise guests. We'll have lots of entertainment. It will be educational, and people will be surprised how much history there is in the struggle for equality in our city over the last 600 or 700 years. So.
Well, that is an event that's taking place next week that we will have more information about on Go Local, so I appreciate giving us a little preview here. So speaking of history, I did want to take out, we have here some Rhode Island trivia. We encountered this board game, I believe it's called Road Trip. And what we're going to do is ask folks trivia questions when they come on from this. Not to put you on the spot, but just a little bit to see what you're... So tell me, name the nation's oldest tavern. It's a Newport restaurant tavern, and even at one time it was a house of ill repute.
Was that the Black Horse Tavern?
Oh, close. It was the White Horse Tavern. White Horse Tavern. Okay. So, I can send you home with a box of these. We went through these before, and I was a little chagrined at a little history. But it's so fun, and we've got so much going on. We've got such great history and a lot going on here in the city. So appreciate your coming in today to brief us sort of where we're at. And we're certainly going to have Council President Luis Aponte on in the future to talk more about what's going on with the city. So Council President, appreciate your time today.
Thanks for the invitation. Congratulations. Great space.
Yes, we're very excited, and we look forward to talking with you more. So Absolutely. Thank you again for coming in, and be safe in the snow.
I'll try.
Get the car off the street. Get the milk and bread.
Get the milk and bread. Yeah, get your Netflix ready.
Everything queued up. Okay, Luis, thank you. Well, that was Council President Luis Aponte, who came in to talk with us about a number of issues from the mayor's state of the city to the issues of bankruptcy to education in the city, and we definitely look forward to talking with him in the future. There's going to be lots going on. So now I would like to welcome the former mayor of Providence, Joe Paolino. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, Kate.
Welcome to the...
Congratulations. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you. This is the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We appreciate your coming in to talk with us here today.
Good to be here.
Just came over a few quick blocks.
Just across the street was fine. Nice and easy.
Well, we wanted to have you in because you've really been kind of front and center with a number of major issues kind of going on here in the city. throughout your career, but most recently this past year, as we said, rolling up your sleeves and trying to tackle issues of importance to you and everyone here in the city. So let's start back about your work with the Downtown Improvement District and saying, how can we address issues in Kennedy Plaza? Now, a lot of folks said, oh, he's just looking to tackle panhandling, but that's not the case. Tell folks exactly sort of the process and how we came to where we are right now.